Undercover owners noticed a waitress working with an injured hand in their diner. Denise Carter balanced trays with one arm wrapped in bandages, pushing through the pain while her manager, Ross, criticized her for even the smallest errors. Customers murmured, some sympathetic, others disapproving of his harshness. What no one realized was that her injury was from an accident, and Ross was concealing something far more troubling. From a corner booth, Harold, the undercover owner, watched closely, sensing that something wasn't right. The more he investigated, the more unsettling the truth became. Before we move ahead, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. Your support truly helps us continue sharing meaningful stories. Stay with us until the end, and if this story connects with you, share your thoughts in the comments and pass it along to a friend. Now let's get started. The diner carried the usual scent of burnt coffee and fried bacon that clung to the air. During the morning rush, the counter buzzed with conversation, the sound of the grill hissing, and the clatter of stacked plates. In the midst of all this stood Denise Carter. She didn't draw attention by noise but by effort, working with the energy of 3 people. Her hair was neatly tied back, her apron already marked with stains, as she moved swiftly, carrying steaming mugs in her good hand and balancing plates against her hip. Her other hand, the left one, was tightly wrapped in bandages extending up to her wrist. Anyone observing closely could notice the stiffness in her movements or the quick flinch when her fingers brushed against something, yet Denise kept a smile on her face. It was her way of coping. Behind the counter, the manager, Ross, stood near the register, smirking as he shouted instructions. "Move faster, Denise. Don't keep customers waiting. This isn't a charity." His voice carried through the diner, sharp enough for everyone to hear. A few customers glanced up, whispering among themselves. At table 3, 2 women in business attire leaned closer, speaking softly. "Poor thing, look at her hand. She shouldn't even be working." "Yeah, but Ross never stops. He's always on her back. I don't know how she handles it." Denise heard them all, the laughter, the pity, and every harsh remark Ross made. Each time she moved a little slower, the pressure grew, but quitting wasn't an option. Rent had to be paid and bills didn't wait. By mid-morning, sweat gathered on the back of her neck and her good arm ached from carrying more than it should. She placed a plate at table 6, offered a polite, "Enjoy your meal," and turned, only to bump straight into Ross. The impact sent a glass of water splashing across Ross's shirt, and the diner instantly fell silent. He leaned in so close that Denise could smell the bitter coffee on his breath. "Clumsy again? Always an excuse with you, isn't it?" he said sharply. A few customers shifted uncomfortably, and one muttered, "Come on, give her a break." But Ross paid no attention, his glare fixed on Denise like someone taking pleasure in authority. She quietly apologized and reached for a towel with her uninjured hand, but Ross snatched it away. The faint grin on his face told her this had nothing to do with the spill. It was about power. And deep down, Denise knew the reason. A few weeks earlier, she had overheard Ross boasting about taking money from the register. She hadn't meant to listen. She was simply cleaning up after closing when his voice carried through the office door. At first, she thought she'd misheard, but as she listened closer, the truth became clear. Ross was stealing. When he found her standing outside that night, frozen in shock, she saw the fury in his eyes before he grabbed her wrist and twisted it until something cracked. The pain brought her to her knees, but Ross only sneered, saying, "Clumsy, huh? Keep it that way. Say one word and you'll lose more than your job." Now, with her injured hand wrapped tightly and nearly useless, she was the one being made to look incapable. By the end of her shift, Denise's body trembled with fatigue. She leaned against the back counter, whispering a quiet prayer that went unheard. What she didn't realize was that someone had been observing her closely all along, someone she assumed was just another customer grabbing a simple meal. That watchful presence was about to change everything. Most customers came and went without noticing much, eating their pancakes, leaving a tip if they felt like it, and hurrying back to their routines. But one man never seemed in a rush. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, with neatly trimmed white hair and worn leather boots that looked more accustomed to open roads than city streets. People casually called him the vet because of his posture, upright and confident, and his sharp, quiet eyes. To most, he seemed like an ordinary retiree passing time over breakfast. But in truth, Harold Whitman was the real owner of the diner. For years, he had kept that fact hidden, choosing instead to blend in with the regulars. Harold believed you could only see how people truly behaved when they thought no one of importance was watching. That morning, he stirred his coffee slowly, his eyes fixed on Denise. He had been observing her for several weeks, always the hardest worker, always the one Ross picked on. But today, with her hand wrapped tightly in bandages, something about her situation felt different. Every tray Denise carried looked as if it might slip from her grasp at any moment. Each smile she offered seemed forced through pain. At a nearby booth, two young men whispered just loud enough for Harold to overhear. "Man, that manager really has it out for her. Yeah, I've seen others slack off plenty of times, but he only picks on her." Harold's jaw tightened. After years of running businesses, he could easily recognize unfair treatment, and this was exactly that. As Ross walked past Harold's table, laughing at something on his phone, Denise asked for help carrying a heavy stack of dishes. Ross didn't even look at her. Instead, he muttered, "Use both hands. Oh, wait, you can't." His laugh echoed through the diner, sharp and unpleasant. Harold stayed still, showing no reaction, but inside, anger was building. Later, as Denise wiped down the counter, he noticed the slight wince in her eyes when she bent her injured wrist too far. He also saw how she avoided Ross completely, like someone who had already learned that being near him meant trouble. Something clearly wasn't right. When the lunch crowd began to thin, Harold quietly asked to speak with the manager. Ross came, overconfidently, assuming it was just another routine customer issue. "Food not hot enough? Coffee too bitter?" Ross asked with a smirk. Harold calmly shook his head. "Just curious about that waitress. She's injured. Why is she still working the floor?" For a brief moment, Ross's grin faltered before he forced it back. "Her? She's clumsy, always making mistakes. Half our incident reports are because of her, but she begged to keep her shift, so I let her. Guess I'm just generous like that." Harold nodded slowly, though inside he didn't believe a word. Generous wasn't the right word. He'd seen the contempt in Ross's expression, the whispers from customers, and Denise's quiet strength as she worked through the pain just to maintain her dignity. That night, Harold stayed seated at the corner booth long after the diner had emptied. His coffee sat cold and untouched as he watched Denise clearing tables with her uninjured hand, still offering faint smiles to customers despite her clear exhaustion. The old veteran's gaze sharpened. If Ross truly thought Denise was the problem, Harold intended to find out the truth for himself. And if his suspicions proved right, someone in that diner was about to regret underestimating them both. The next morning, Harold returned to the diner. He sat in his usual corner booth with the same black coffee in front of him. To everyone else, he looked like the same quiet veteran with nothing better to do, but his attention wasn't on the menu. It was on Ross. Ross moved confidently from table to table, joking with customers and laughing louder than anyone else. Yet, the moment Denise passed by, his expression changed. Every action she took became a reason for him to criticize. If she poured coffee too slowly, he snapped his fingers. If she wiped the counter more than once, he muttered about wasting time. Harold quickly noticed a clear pattern. This wasn't normal supervision, it was targeted behavior. When Denise accidentally dropped a fork, Ross shook his head in exaggerated frustration and told a nearby table, "See what I have to deal with? Always careless." Some customers chuckled awkwardly, unsure whether he was serious. Denise bent to pick up the fork, her good hand trembling as her face flushed with embarrassment. By that point, Harold's suspicion had solidified into certainty. Ross was deliberately setting her up. Later that afternoon, Harold quietly stepped into the back office, pretending to look for the restroom. The door was unlocked and papers were scattered across the desk. His eyes stopped on a pile of misconduct reports, each one with Denise's name written clearly at the top. Each report accused Denise of minor issues, spilled drinks, missed orders, or having a bad attitude. But Harold had been coming to that diner for months, and not once had he seen her behave unprofessionally. As he read further, something even more troubling appeared. The cash register records didn't balance. Each week, the totals dropped, yet no official reports had been made. Harold's stomach tightened. He recognized the signs. He'd dealt with theft in his own businesses before. Ross wasn't just being unfair. He was hiding something. That evening, Harold stayed later than usual, quietly nursing his coffee as the diner cleared out. When the final customers left, Ross disappeared into the office. The door didn't shut completely and voices carried into the hallway. "Another $5,000 easy," Ross bragged, laughing. "And when they notice the missing cash, that little waitress takes the blame. She's already got the most write-ups. No one's going to believe her over me." A second voice, likely one of Ross's drinking buddies, chuckled. "You're asking for trouble, man. What if she talks?" Ross's voice dropped to a colder tone. "She won't. Not with that hand. I made sure it's broken enough for her to remember who's in charge." Harold stood frozen in the shadows, his fists tightening as his breathing grew slow and heavy. This wasn't just theft, it was abuse, both physical and deliberate. He thought of Denise forcing a smile through the pain, continuing her work as if nothing had happened, and something inside him hardened. The voices in the office faded into drunken laughter. Harold quietly slipped out through the side door, the cool night air hitting his face. For the first time in years, his old military instincts resurfaced. He had witnessed injustice before, but discovering it within his own business was something he couldn't ignore. The truth was clear now, and tomorrow the pretense would end. The next morning, the diner came alive as usual. Coffee pots hissed, forks clinked, and the steady rhythm of conversation filled the air. Denise moved between tables, her bandaged hand pressed against her apron. To most, she looked like another exhausted employee working through pain. But to Harold, she appeared to be carrying a much heavier burden than trays or plates. Today, however, wouldn't be routine. Harold walked in quietly, dressed the same worn boots, same denim jacket, but his posture was different. This time he wasn't there as a customer. He was there that morning not as a customer, but as the owner. Ross stood by the counter, laughing too loudly and joking with two waitresses who rolled their eyes the moment he turned away. When he noticed Harold, his grin wavered. "You again? Back for the eggs?" Harold didn't respond. Instead, he walked to the center of the diner and gently tapped his spoon against his coffee cup. The faint metallic sound caught everyone's attention. Conversation stopped. Forks paused midair. Denise froze, glancing toward him in confusion. "Good morning, everyone," Harold said evenly, his tone calm yet firm. "I think it's time you all know who I really am." Ross gave a nervous laugh. "What, you writing a book or something?" Harold's eyes fixed on him. "No, Ross, I own this diner." The room fell completely silent. A fork dropped onto a plate. Denise's eyes widened, her mouth slightly open in disbelief. For years, no one had realized the quiet man in the corner booth was the one signing their paychecks. Ross tried to laugh it off, but his face had turned pale. "You're joking, right?" Without a word, Harold took a folder from inside his jacket and placed it on the counter. Papers spilled out, misconduct reports, financial records, and register logs. "I've seen enough," he said firmly. "I know exactly what you've been doing, Ross. Every false report you filed against Denise, every dollar you took from the register, and I know what happened to her hand." Gasps spread through the diner as customers turned to watch. The two women seated at the business table exchanged whispers. "I knew it," one muttered. "I knew he was trouble," Ross stammered, his voice unsteady. This is nonsense." "You can't prove anything." But before he could finish, two uniformed officers entered through the door. Harold had called them earlier that morning. Their presence alone silenced the entire diner. Ross's confidence collapsed. "Wait, you can't, this isn't—" he started, but the sound of handcuffs clicking around his wrists cut him off. The diner filled with low murmurs as Ross was led outside, his protests fading beneath the clink of chains. Denise stood still, her good hand pressed against her chest. For once, Ross wasn't towering over her. For once, the blame no longer rested on her shoulders. Harold turned to her, his tone gentler now. "You've kept this place running, even when others lied about you. From today onward, you're not just a waitress, you're the new floor supervisor." Denise blinked, tears welling in her eyes. The bandaged hand trembled as she covered her lips, a quiet sob slipping through. Customers began to clap, some softly, others loud enough to fill the room. For the first time in years, Denise stood tall, not as someone pitied, but as someone finally recognized for her strength. Outside, Ross's shouting faded as the police car drove away. Inside, the diner smelled the same, burnt coffee and grease, but the air felt lighter, cleaner. Harold returned to his usual booth, coffee in hand. But this time he wasn't just observing, he was smiling. Justice had finally been served. Never underestimate the quiet strength of those who keep going, even when life tries to break them. Denise's story is proof that truth always prevails and justice always finds the guilty. If you believe stories like this deserve to be shared, hit subscribe, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment below because your voice matters too.